Hi, and welcome to Sacred Spaces. My name is Ines Hemmings, and today we're visiting the historic Lippincott house in Eaglemont, Melbourne. We will talk to Louise Honman, who is a member of the Victorian Heritage Council, and find out more about the hidden treasures that this building has to offer. So Louise, could you tell us a bit more about the background of this historic building?
Yes, I can. I can tell you that it was built in around 1917-18 for Roy Lippincott. Roy was an American architect. He came out here with Walter Burley Griffin to Australia around the time that Canberra was designed. They settled in Eaglemont and they built this rather interesting cottage, I suppose. It's a very small house, and it displays a very different type of architecture from what was happening elsewhere in Australia at that time.
I can imagine,
Yeah.
Well, if we look at this house, it has quite some interesting features. So why is it a historic building? What makes it historically significant, would you say?
It's historically significant because of its designer, its associations. It's also because it comes from a very rich history of architecture and innovation in the United States, particularly the Midwest and Chicago.
Okay.
Walter Burley Griffin and Roy Lippincott and also Griffin's wife, Marion Marnie, worked in the offices of Frank Lloyd Wright and other architects around the Chicago area. So when they came here, they brought with them the very latest trends, styles, innovation that was happening within that time and that period. And what we have here is a small, somewhat a replica of some of the houses that Burley Griffin designed through Frank Lloyd Wright's office.
Okay.
And it's transplanted to this little suburb in Melbourne.
So how does this house fit into the wider context? Is there any specific style it can be referred to?
It can, and it fits into what I would call the prairie style, or the American arts and crafts from the Midwest around Chicago. So Walter Burley Griffin and Roy Lippincott and Griffin's wife Marion Marnie came out to Australia after Griffin won the design for Canberra, and they had all worked in offices around Chicago, even with Frank Lloyd Wright, so that they brought with them the very latest innovation to Australia. And even though it's a very unpretentious house, it still has many things that are quite different to what was happening here at that time. It was very much about the natural materials and about being anchored to the earth.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you said prairie style arts and crafts movement.
Yeah.
What can we understand about it? How does it reflect in the design of the building, and what would you say are the most interesting architectural features?
I think if you look at the roof, you'll see that it's very much a steeply pitched roof with very wide overhanging eaves. The apex of the roof comes forward over the front door in a very particular angular way. It has brickwork that is quite unusual in the way it's textured, with the different bricks staggered and raised proud of the main brickwork. The bands of render between the brickwork are quite plain but quite distinctive. And one of the things that is quite important about it is that the way in which the lower walls, the the buttress, almost like a buttress effect, that they're stepped out, and they really anchor the building to the land, and being part of the landscape was very much a part of this prairie style and this arts and crafts. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Should we look inside and find
Yeah.
out more?
That would be a good idea.
Great,
Yeah.
let's go. Wow, feels very cozy. Rather small though, but still I feel there's enough space to move around. Do you think was there any intention from the architect to plan it this way?
There was a very special intention of the architect. The house is very small, as you see. It doesn't have a hallway. It has no circulation space. The rooms open off one another. As you can see, we just walked in straight from the outside to the living room area. So the house was designed deliberately to be very small, to be affordable for anyone who would want to own one. It wasn't for the wealthy. And the idea was to minimise the use of space and materials, and to work to place the house so that you still had a lot of land and garden around it. The landscape was as important as the house. So minimising the footprint of the house on the land was part of the philosophy.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So talking about space and materiality, what do you think are the most important architectural features that make up for this atmosphere?
I asked the family who've lived here for many decades what was important to them about the house and what was special. And their answer was the quality of light, particularly the quality of light in this room. As you see, there's a bank of windows that work around the corner. And even though the house is very solid and small, it's not claustrophobic, because you can see out into the garden through all of these beautiful windows, and there's a very particular light that falls into the interior.
Yes, beautiful. So this is a very interesting object here. Does this have any nostalgic value, do you think?
Look, it does. It is actually a lampshade, and it was designed for this house. It was one of a pair, and they would be turned upside down as lampshades. It was designed by Griffin or Lippincott, and is very similar to the ceiling of the Capitol Theatre in Swanston Street. Okay. So it's a very special object, and fortunately it's been retained with the house, even though the lampshades have been changed. The family have been very welcoming, and they've brought out some photographs of the house. Also, there's a photograph of Walter Burley Griffin himself sitting right by this incredible fireplace, and also another one outside the house, and a blueprint of the original plans. But maybe it's worth talking a little bit about the fireplace. It reflects the angle of the roof, the angle of the eaves. So we've brought some of the exterior features of the house to the interior, and it's also devoid of applied ornament. It's very integral to the design of the house, and it doesn't have any of that sort of decoration onto it. So again, that's a very arts and crafts thing to do, that you're being very honest with the materials and the design.
So Louise, this is a beautiful portrait. Does it have any significance?
It does have significance to the family who moved here. It's a portrait of Norrie Griffin, and she's the wife of the artist Murray Griffin, and they moved here in 1939. And Murray painted this picture of his wife, It's always hung next to the fireplace. It's very important to the family, and it will always be there.
So Louise, we're standing here in the old bedroom, which is connected to and leads into the sitting room. And there's one interesting thing that I've noticed is that as you move from this room into this room, there is a change in atmosphere. There's a difference in temperature. I mean, you can really feel it. Why do you think is that?
I think this room was designed to be a semi-outdoor room. You can see that on the walls it's just the face brickwork, there's no plaster. The ceiling is very different to the ceiling in the old bedroom. There's also the bank of windows that allowed light and also fresh air into here. So it is designed to be a very different type of space from the rather cosier space of the bedroom that was once used as a bedroom. So the other thing that's interesting is the set of doors that are here. They're a beautiful timber door with glazing, and they're set on hinges that allow you to actually take the doors off should you need to. So they've been put back specially for the filming today, just to show how that they match in with the other doors. But it's a very particular transition between this, as I said, semi-outdoor space to this rather more formal space with another fireplace and the plastered walls.
Brilliant. Could you tell us a little bit more about the windows and the beautiful handles?
A lot of the windows have the original iron handles on them, handmade catches. Some of them have been replaced, but a lot of them are still there. And many of the small details that were designed for this house are still here. The hinges, as I said, and the window catches and some of the doorknobs and other door furniture.
So the ceiling here is really low. Is there any reason for that?
The ceiling is very low because above it is a water tank. It was heated from a wood stove from the kitchen, and the water tank also had an air circulation system, and it was a rudimentary central heating system, which for the time was quite unusual. Many houses of this period obviously didn't have heating systems. They were heated entirely from the fireplaces. But this one, not only did it have the fireplaces, but it also had an air circulation system from this wood stove. So the ceiling is really low just to accommodate that tank.
So we're standing here in front of the house in the garden, here in front of this beautiful large tree. Now, tell me, Louise, how does the Lippincott house fit into its natural landscape?
The house is situated on the Eaglemont estate, which was one of two estates that Walter Burley Griffin laid out within Eaglemont, and his design was very different to the way subdivisions were normally laid out in a grid pattern. Walter Burley Griffin used the landscape to lay out his streets and used the topography of the land. And this is very evident in the design for Canberra. But here in Glenard Drive in Eaglemont, you'll see that there's a small parkland with some trees on it. And he was very concerned to conserve and look after the Australian landscape, the gum trees, and to set his buildings and his subdivisions within that landscape rather than impose a particular pattern on them. So we find that he was very active in 3 areas of professional life, both in architecture, in town planning, and also in landscape architecture. And he continued to practice those professions for a very long time.
So Louise, out of the 2,500 places on the Victorian Heritage Register, why is the Lippincott House so sacred to you?
The Lippincott House is a place that I visited as a child. I visited Murray and his family here, and I remember sitting in the large room and looking at the quality of the light and looking at the details around me and thinking that this was indeed a very special house. So for me it has many childhood memories, and I would very much like to share it with the viewers. The house also has, as we spoke about, a very big story in terms of its architecture and where it's come from, but it's also got a wonderful family story in how it's been looked after over the years and preserved for everyone to enjoy.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this beautiful story with us, Louise. And thank you also to you. Thank you for watching. My name is Ines Hemmings and you've been watching Sacred Spaces. See you next time.